white, blue eyes, fair hair. You fit the description more than I do. Look, that's how unjust my conviction was.
Can you explain to the audience the case that you got sent to prison for?
I and two other men were arrested with a murder and a series of robberies. We were sentenced to life imprisonment for a crime I didn't commit.
What was that first night like going into prison?
I was angry, man. I was kind of like trying to be tough but terrified, but trying to be tough but terrified.
So there was violence in the prison?
I witnessed a lot of extreme violence in prison, and I participated in a lot of extreme violence.
It feels like you're retelling fiction because it's so out of this world, but it's not.
The media headlines were calling me a monster. They were calling me a killer. They were calling me a murderer. I was just angry, bitter, twisted. Reflecting on it, I don't know how I survived it, but I did.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to 100 Questions with Tom Simons. Now, if I could just ask, if you would please be able to subscribe to the channel, that would honestly mean the world. Today's guest is someone who has lived a life most people couldn't even imagine. He was once sentenced to life in prison for a murder he didn't commit and spent 12 years behind bars before fighting to have his conviction overturned. Since then, he's rebuilt his life as a journalist and presenter, now traveling the world, going inside some of the most dangerous prisons on the planet. And today, I've got 100 questions to try and understand him and learn about a part of the world I know literally nothing about. Raphael Rowe, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Raphael, look, this show is very simple. We've got 1 hour to try and get through these 100 questions. Okay, every single question counts. This right here is my final question. This is what I want to ask you the most.
Okay.
We're going to say that to the end. Okay, should we dive in?
Yep.
So, you were sentenced to life for a murder that you didn't commit.
Yeah.
Do you ever, this might be a stupid question, do you ever get over something like that?
Nope.
No.
No, it's as simple as that. You don't. You're scarred internally, psychologically, and in my case, physically. So no, you never get over that. We're talking about it right now, right? And that it happened more than 30 odd years ago. I went away long before you were even floating into becoming.
Well, I was sperm.
you weren't even sperm in those days. You know, it's that long ago.
What year would this have been?
1988.
Yeah, I was 2004.
There you go.
Hell, man. And so you carried that with you every day?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're talking about it now, right now, aren't we?
Yeah.
So, and I live with it every day because it shaped the person that I become.
Yes. Yeah. Can we go back to the beginning? Can we talk about the case and understand what's happened? Can you explain to the audience the case that you got sent to prison for?
So in 1988, I and two other men were arrested, charged with a murder and a series of robberies, which were high profile at the time. They called us or dubbed us the M25 gang. We were wrongly accused. We went on trial. We were convicted. We were sentenced to life imprisonment, never to be released. 12 years, as you shared, it took for campaigners, my family and lawyers to get my convictions overturned. And I weren't just in a prison, I was in prisons within prisons. I mean, the deepest, darkest cells you could imagine here in the British criminal justice system.
Yeah, and what were these murders?
A murder. There was only one murder.
Yeah.
So one man got killed during a hijacking. There was an attempted murder, an aggravated robbery, and two other robberies where property, jewelry, and things like that were stolen.
Okay, yeah. Did they ever find the real person that did that?
No one has ever been convicted since my convictions and my two co-defendants' convictions were overturned.
Are there still people looking into it, or?
No. The police won't accept their responsibility, even though the judges at the Court of Appeal at the end of the case would have said there was a conspiracy. You know, money was paid, i.e. reward money was paid to individuals to give false evidence. There was never any forensic evidence. There wouldn't be, would there? If you weren't at the scene of a crime, your DNA and forensics are not going to be there. And so ours wasn't. There was forensic evidence at the scene of the crime, but it belonged to someone else. There was also a racist element. You know, the victims of the crimes described the perpetrators as two white men and one black man. In 1988, I had dreadlocks. My co-defendant had dreadlocks. And so 3 black guys were locked up, even though the victims described you, Tom, you know, white, blue eyes, fair hair. You fit the description more than I do. Look at us. You know, so that's how unjust my conviction was. But this is 1988. We're talking about a completely different time.
Did anyone from the government or from that case or any of the police apologise to you?
I got an apology from a police, not from the case. I got an apology from the police, a senior police officer, had nothing to do with my case a few years ago. But no, they don't say sorry.
Oh, God. I'm so sorry I've had to go through that. That's fucking...
It's not for you to apologise, is it? It's, for me to share these stories so that people realise it goes on, especially young men like yourself. You need to know that when you hear stories of people saying, I'm in prison for something I didn't do, you can't just dismiss them. 99% of them, Tom, are guilty of sin. They just don't want to accept the responsibility. But there are that percentage that are not guilty, like myself, who then rot in prison until somebody stands up and helps us.
And how did you first become a suspect?
Somebody, as I say, got paid a reward money to send the police in our direction. So it's not that you become a suspect. I was one of 12 or 13 people arrested. And
sorry, what does that mean? Someone paid reward money for?
So the Daily Mail and the police, who were hunting this gang, who were on the front page of all the national newspapers and all the news headlines.
Gang of 3 people.
Gang of 3 people. So there's all these headlines. We need to catch these killers. We need to catch these robbers. They're terrorizing our society. And so the Daily Mail puts up this reward, £20,000 for information that will lead to the arrest of this naughty gang. So that's what I mean. So then somebody comes forward and says, I know who did it.
Okay.
Give me some money.
I'm with you.
And
Do you know who that was?
Simplifying it. Yeah. It's never been officially declared. But the European Court of Human Rights, where I had to take my case at the end to get my convictions overturned, unanimously, 21 judges from across Europe, unanimously ruled that the non-disclosure of the police's informer who got the reward meant that we didn't get a fair trial. And then it becomes very technical. But we know who it was because a BBC undercover investigation secretly recorded this young man admitting that he got paid money to give false evidence in my case. Bang, my case then starts to go back.
Oh my God.
And there's a lot more to it than that. I'm giving you some details, but it's as naughty as that.
What was the moment that you realised you were being accused for this?
When the police officer in the fucking interview was saying to me, you're a murderer, you're a robber, basically.
Yeah.
I wasn't, even I was only 20 at the time, right? So I was a year younger than you are. And even though I was sitting in that interview, I knew I didn't do what I was being accused of, right? So I was as cocky as they come. Didn't do it. No, I was here trying to remember where I was. I was probably high on weed or whatever it is I was smoking at the time. So I, didn't sit in my interview and do what you see on television dramas. No comment. No comment. I told them where I was and what I was doing, and they didn't believe a word I was saying. And even when the truth was starting to come to light, they started to shift the goalpost and the evidence and get people to make up stories along the line. As I say, the only forensic evidence in my case pointed in a completely different direction because I wasn't at the scene of any of these crimes. Therefore, there was no forensic evidence against me.
Yeah.
But there was forensic evidence against other people, but they never got charged. In fact, they got the reward money.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Fuck. So somehow with this evidence, you go into court and then they lock you up. What was that?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to put it is you have some...
I apologise if I'm coming off like...
No, I love
really
it.
I'm just trying to completely understand.
What you've got in a trial... So I was in the number one court at the Old Bailey, biggest court you can go in. And what you had is a skilled prosecutor who's very clever at making you, i.e. you or me, in that dock look like the baddest person that exists on earth, regardless of what the evidence suggests. If you've got a victim, right, of a crime, Tom goes into the witness box and you say, the person who attacked me had very dark skin and dreadlocks, but the jury convict a white guy with blue eyes. You as a victim are going to think, well, that wasn't the person that attacked me. I know it wasn't.
Yeah.
So that's how skilled the prosecution was. He was able to convince a jury that the victims of the crimes got their facts wrong.
What a knobhead.
Well, it's worse than that, isn't it? It
is what it is. Sorry, that is quite the understatement.
yeah. But it is, you simplify it like that, but it is. And then multiply that 100 times. And I'm not exaggerating here. When a victim's standing up in the dock, you've got me and my two co-defendants sitting in the cage, if you like, accused of murder and robberies. You've got a victim sort of saying, and at some point I saw the blue eyes of the man that was staring me in the face. through the balaclava, and then I noticed the fair hair protruding from the balaclava, and he had white skin.
How could they possibly then?
That's what we were up against for the next 12 years. I then had to try and prove what was already proven in a court, that I didn't do what I was in prison for, and that's why I was angry and bitter and twisted, and I fought like an animal in all those years I was in prison. And lo and behold, 12 years later, I got out.
Yeah. Oh my God. Sorry, so much to sort of stomach when you.
But we ain't done many questions.
No, we're doing good. We're doing great. When you went to trial, were you confident that the jury would see you as innocent? Because there's such obvious evidence.
No, I wasn't actually, because when I was on remand, i.e. I hadn't been convicted.
What's remand? Sorry.
So remand is when you're held in prison having not been convicted yet. So they're waiting for trial. So I was in Brixton Prison, and I was in a prison within a prison. So you get normal prisons, right?
Yeah.
But then in Brixton, at the time I was in there, you had a prison built within the prison.
Yeah.
So you had the normal population, and you had this very secure unit, which was terrifying. And it was in those 18 months that I started.
You were in there for 18 months?
I was in there for 18 months waiting to go on trial.
So can I ask, those first 18 months, what was that first night like going into prison? Because your life just paused, right? You know.
I don't know. I was angry. I'd say I was angry from the get-go, because I knew in those interviews. So when I was first nicked at gunpoint, and
At gunpoint?
At gunpoint, you know, police, guns, helicopters, all that kind of stuff, you know, woo, 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 taking you, and then the media. It was a bit of a circus, because how does the media turn up at my property when I'm being arrested unless the police have told them, come along, we've got a bit of entertainment for you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Just a bullshit cycle, isn't it? It's just awful.
And it's worse than that. You know, it's worse than that. Not just because I was the victim of it, but it's worse than that because they were able to get away with it.
Yeah.
You know, that's the terrifying
Utterly
thing.
terrible.
But I was angry. That's the answer to your question. I was angry from the get-go. So my first days in a prison cell, in a prison within a prison, and I emphasize that because it doesn't exist in this country anymore.
Yeah.
You know, as an A-man, highest category type prison, everywhere I went, there were 2 dogs with me and a prison officer escorting me. I was deemed that dangerous. I was 20 years old. Never been to prison before. Not, you know, been in trouble a couple of times. Yeah, I was off the streets of Southeast London. So,
and how were you handling that at the time?
I was angry, man. I was kind of like trying to be tough, but terrified, but trying to be tough, but terrified.
Did you have anyone you could talk to when you're in there?
No, I was banged up literally 23 hours a day. The only time I was allowed out of my cell was to go into a cage exercise yard on my own.
What did I to me, this is almost, it feels like you're retelling fiction because it's so out of this world, but it's not. And I can't even possibly imagine what that was like. What was that like?
I suppose people deal with things differently, right? It shaped me into the man that I become, in the same way that your career is going to shape you into the man that you become, and girls into the women that they become, etc. So what it did is it cut out the person I was and replaced it with the person that I become, which went on to become a really successful journalist, but that's another chapter. But at that time, I was just angry, bitter, twisted, and tormented by the whole ordeal. And by the time I got to trial, there was a bit of me that kind of thought they cannot convict me because the evidence is now standing in the face. You know, how do you tell a jury that I'm supposed to have committed a murder and all these really violent robberies? There's not one piece of forensic evidence to prove that. Not that that's the golden bar, but gosh, the types of crimes that were committed, there would have been some forensic evidence against the perpetrators. And what evidence there wasn't against me.
What did you, just for the details, like what did you actually do for 18 months when you're by yourself? Nothing.
I try to. It's hard actually, because look, in the time that I was banged up, I didn't have a television, I didn't have a toilet, I didn't have a sink. I pissed and pooed in a potty, you know, like a chamber pot that they used to use in Victorian times. That's what I had in my cell. And when it was full up, I was trying to shit in newspaper and squeeze it out of bars, you know, so it wasn't sitting in my cell. So
Can you remember this time, or is it just a blur?
I'm telling you it as I see it.
Yeah,
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 I
yeah.
remember I can project myself back into that cell. It was that tormenting. That's compartmentized,
Now,
and
yeah.
it's kind of in the head.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course I can remember it, and it doesn't torment me to the point that I well, you can hear it in my voice, can't you, when I'm talking about it? That
Yeah.
there is a reflection of what that was like. But that's how it shaped me to become the person that I became.
So you would just kind of wait then for 18 months?
Yeah, no handle on the inside of a door, so I couldn't go out when I wanted. I mean, I think as the months turned into the first year and so, I started to get documents from the prosecution and my defense. So then I could absorb myself in reading every page of every document or the evidence that was against me or my co-defendants or was just evidence in the case. Um, and to be fair, that was probably the only light in this really dark space because
Yes.
as I'm reading the victims describing the description of the perpetrators, I'm like, oh my God, so why the hell am I in prison? That
Yeah.
is what's going to get me out of here. Da di da di da.
Yeah. Okay, so you have this kind of light, you then go into the court and there's this moment where the jury comes back, return their verdict, and you're guilty. What goes through your mind in that moment?
I can't remember what went through my mind in that moment, but what would go through your mind in that moment? You're just
I
being told you're going to prison for the rest of your
I
life for
couldn't
something you
handle it.
didn't do. You'd be surprised, actually, and I think most people will be surprised that, yeah, you crumble and you break, but equally, there's a part of you that, well, there was of me, that was determined not to let them get away with it.
I I know everyone in this room's thinking it, and it's so difficult to put into words and kind of obvious, but it's so like inspiring that you managed to hold on throughout all of this. And I'm sure you've heard that a million times, but man, good, wow, I'm honestly struggling to put into words the level of sort of admiration I feel for you to be able to continue to sort of hang in there and get through it, man. That's
Mm.
like, wow.
Yeah, and I'm gonna take that because
Yeah,
it it
please
is
do.
it
Yeah,
is a tough thing
really
to
tough.
do. I put in a lot of the graft over the years that I was in prison to get my convictions overturned because what can my family do? They're
Yeah.
working class, Southeast London.
How are they reacting to all of this?
Look, they were angry for me, but at the same time, they were helpless. There was nothing they could do.
Yeah.
They couldn't do anything whatsoever. Mum, dad couldn't do anything for their son, their only son, who's now banged up in prison, serving a life sentence for a murder he didn't commit.
Yeah.
But they didn't know whether I did or didn't do it, did they?
Yeah.
How could they? They believed me when I told them I didn't. They believed us when we said we'd been wrongly convicted. But at the back of their minds, they're thinking, why would you lock up my son for something he didn't do? Maybe there is they're going to doubt you. People will doubt you.
Yeah.
As the years went on and they understood things, no, but everybody has the right to be in that place, right?
Yeah. Okay, so then you enter into prison now,
Mm,
for indefinite.
mm.
How was that to adapt to prison life once you were
I
convicted?
never did. I didn't conform. I didn't accept my predicament. And by that, I mean there is a regime in prison, right, where you're expected to do things as a convicted person, right?
What are those?
So it might be they unlock your door at 7 o'clock in the morning and you're expected to go to work labour and earn your crust, your money, whatever that might be, £3 a week or whatever it is. But I refused to do that because I shouldn't be in prison. So I refused to go to work and do what the regime expected of me. And so I'd get punished. So instead of kind of walking out my cell, they'd drag me out my cell, take me to the isolation, segregation block. And that went on for years. It went on for years consistently because I refused to accept my predicament. So that's one element of it. I also refused to kind of do anything that they asked me to do because most people who are in prison for a crime they committed might need to see a psychologist. They might to go to an anger management course or do whatever it is so that they can say they've been rehabilitated because I hadn't done a crime. Because I was convicted of something I didn't do, I weren't participating in any of that. So again, I'd get punished or I'd be threatened with no privileges, whatever little privileges they would give. But I
Yeah.
accepted that as part of the consequence.
And how did the people in the prison react to you saying, "Look, I'm innocent. I'm not
Didn't
gonna-"
believe a word I said.
Really?
Didn't believe a word I said. The screws, i.e. the prison officers didn't, the prisoners didn't. They didn't believe a word I said for the first 5 or 6 years. And then they realised, hold on, this young guy, he's not backing down.
Yeah.
And then there were some notorious people in prison, like the Cray twins, right? And Reggie Cray, who was one of those he become, I wouldn't say a friend, but he become a long-term acquaintance of mine. We were banged
Are
up
they
in
the
this.
ones that the Tom Hardy movies based?
Yes,
Okay,
yes, the
yeah.
legends,
Yeah.
the old Cray twins, yeah, yeah. Whether you do or don't like what they didn't do, whatever you believe of the myth, and I know it's all a myth because I was as close as I am to you with him for many years in the sense that we'd have these conversations.
Yeah.
Um, so I knew him well. But the point I'm making is the testimony in one of his books, Reggie Cray, this is, that in all the 30 odd years that he'd been in prison, the only person he ever met in prison that he truly believed was innocent was me. And he'd met them all. He'd heard it all. He'd seen it all and whatever. But his relationship with me was very different in the sense that he believed me because he saw the way I conducted myself in prison. I just wouldn't accept that I was going to spend the rest of my life in prison for a crime I didn't commit, and I wasn't going to let the system get away with it. And he hadn't seen that amongst other people before.
Was there a lot of danger in the prison? What was it dangerous? Was it scary? Was it again? I apologize. I'm coming off so naive. It's just so completely distant from.
No, but it's
my
good
world.
that you are, because most people are under the impression that you drop a bar of soap in the showers in prison, you bend over to pick it up, and you get up the arse.
Yeah.
And it's not like that.
No.
Prison's not like that. There is extreme violence in prison. There's extremely dangerous and violent individuals in prison. I would argue that the majority, apart from those that are psychotic and they should be in a hospital rather than a prison, I think a lot of it is driven by their lack of education.
Yeah.
And when I say that, rather than being able to articulate an argument, they throw their fist around or use weapons, right? Because they can't do it. So that's where a lot of the violence comes from. You know, there's a confrontation that you and I might today argue about, and then you win on points.
Yeah.
But back in prison, we would have had a fisty fight or a knife fight or a battery in a sock or pool balls
Yeah.
in a sock kind of violent
Yeah.
fight. So I witnessed a lot of extreme violence in prison, and I participated in a lot of extreme violence in prison for two reasons. One, to protect myself, and two, to protect myself.
When did you decide I'm going to start fighting this case for myself?
The day I was arrested.
Yeah. And what did that look like in terms of you were reading, right, and researching? And
Yeah, so I mean, there was a twist. Obviously, I initially I'm fighting something I didn't understand, and then I did a correspondence course in prison, a journalism correspondence course while I was in prison.
okay, yeah.
But that was to manipulate the media. The media headlines were calling me a monster. They were calling me a killer. They were calling me a murderer. They were calling me the leader of a gang and all that kind of stuff, right? No truth in it. So I needed to change those headlines. I needed them to call me the innocent man, the man who didn't do it, this innocent prisoner. So I studied journalism in correspondence course while I was in prison, because I'm 26, 27 years old. I've been away for the last 7 years. And I realized that throwing my fist at prison officers was not going to get me back my freedom.
Yeah.
So I studied journalism so I could try and manipulate some of the headlines and stories that were being written about me in the paper. And it worked, because after a year or 2 years of doing that course, I was able to write to some of our national newspapers that still exist today, The Guardian. They would publish my letters where I was questioning the safety of my own convictions or evidence. The headlines started to change. I was no longer being called a monster and a murderer, but there were now questions about, is this man innocent?
Yeah.
And I remember there was one moment I was in a maximum security prison up in Leicestershire, banged up in my cell within a cell on my own. And a screw prison officer slid a newspaper under my cell. And on the front of it, it had look at pages, whatever it was, 9 and 10. So I opened it up, page 9 and 10. There was a big picture of me, and it was asking the question that had been asked for the last 8 years. Is this man white? With a big picture of me and my dreadlocks and my brown eyes. Is this man white with blue eyes and fair hair? My trajectory changed around then when the media started questioning the safety of my convictions. Society started to question the safety of my convictions, and therefore the establishment, i.e. the system that put me in prison for a crime I didn't commit, got worried.
How long did you have to fight the conviction for?
12 years.
And what kept you going for 12 years?
Hope, anger, bitterness.
Yeah.
I'd say love, but I don't know if that really existed in me then.
Yeah.
the desire to want to have sex again
Yeah.
with a woman. Not that I had sex with guys. I didn't go that way.
Yeah.
Guys do, you know,
Fair.
and I saw it day and night. I didn't. Having kids, I wanted to come out and have kids. I wanted to have not a normal life. I just wanted to have a life. But yeah, it was the normal things that we want, right, in life.
What was that moment like when you found out that your conviction had been, is it quashed? Yeah.
I cried for the first time. So it was one of those moments. The judges have just overturned my conviction. I'm free. You know, you got to put it into perspective, right? I've just
How old were you now?
32.
And you've been in there for 12 years.
Been in there for 12 years, right? So putting it into context, I've been in a cell on my own for 12 years without a toilet, without a sink, without any of that. They were just starting to introduce that in 2000 or in the early 90s, but in the establishments I was in, they never had that. So the context, I'm coming out of a four-walled space where everything was about my own thoughts bouncing off four walls for 12 years, right? And reflecting on it, I don't know how I survived it, but I did, as men do, and women. But it was when my convictions were quashed, all of a sudden I'm being released, right?
How quickly were you released once it was quashed?
Well, it still took a couple of hours because they take you down to the cells and process you and make sure that you've got no outstanding warrants for your arrest. You know, I've been in prison for 12 years. So.
Yeah.
But the reality is they did then accept that they had to let me go. So, you know, it was the last time that a door was open for me, because 12 years doors have been open for me, right? Didn't open a door for myself for 12 years, no handles on the inside of doors. Contextualize that. So when they opened that Court of Appeal door at the back of the court for the last time, the people that were out there to meet me was my mum and my dad and my sisters. So that was the first time I was able to be
That must have been so
myself.
emotional. Right?
Cried for the first time, you know. And but it was a kind of, it was a happy cry. That kind of all that anger and bitterness that I carried for 12 years almost fell on the Court of Appeal steps, and then I walked out to, you know, the publicity.
Take me through this. How was this now coming out of prison, coming back to the real world? How had the world changed since then?
Well, I mean, when I was in prison, I couldn't move any faster than my feet could take me, right? So all of a sudden, I'm getting put in the back of a taxi that's going at 15, 20 miles an hour. I'm disorientated because
Overwhelmed
by the sheer simpleness of speed. You know, something.
What's that like being in a car?
Yeah, it was all of those things. You know, reaching for a handle, opening a door for myself was challenging. Sleeping in a bed that was bigger than a single bed that wasn't bolted up against the wall.
Could you sleep once you're out there, or was it
like a baby?
Yeah, even easier.
Yeah, I mean that I couldn't sleep with anybody. I could have sex, but then I couldn't sleep in the same bed as somebody for God knows how long. I had to readapt to so many little things. My sister, on the first day that I got out, handed me a mobile phone, right? But we're talking Nokia. Anybody in this room who reaches that
at school,
a Nokia, you know, no smartphones. This is an old school Nokia.
Yeah. I know the Nokias.
Handed me, and I didn't know what to do with it. And you might think that's silly. Now, of course, you know what to do with it, but we didn't have phones smuggled into prisons that I was in, because I was in maximum security prison. Really hard to get those kind of things in, even when they did come out, and they were rocks, you know. And unless somebody's prepared to shove a rock up their ass, that is not getting into the prison.
You choose to become a journalist then, right?
I kind of fell into it, actually. I chose to become a journalist when I was in prison, but that was simply to manipulate the media into changing the narrative about who I was and that I was innocent. So that was a strategic move. I don't think I was as clever to use words like strategic back then.
Yeah.
But it was obviously a move to try and get people to think differently of who I was and what was happening to me. I was a smoker at the time, and I was at the back of the old BBC television centre in White City, which is now a block of flats or whatever it is. And I was introduced to the then editor of the Radio 4 Today programme, who was also a smoker, powerful man, because he was in charge of one of the most prestigious radio programmes. And he offered me a job, just like that.
In the smoking area.
In the smoking area. Asked me to come and
work. That's what you want,
with
innit? Yeah.
And that's what and that's,
things are turning around.
He changed the trajectory of my life, because he gave me an opportunity, but also because of my connections in the criminal underworld. You know, I just spent 12 years with some of the most notorious prisoners in the country, and had that about me.
So I'd like to ask you now, since doing your journalism, you've transitioned over into doing the Netflix show Inside the World's Toughest Prisons. Can you tell me a bit about this and what the show is? What's that experience like for you?
2000, I'm out of prison. I then go on to be a journalist for the BBC for
Yep.
the next 15 years, doing some of the most dangerous elements of journalism you can possibly do. As an undercover journalist, smuggling diamonds from Africa to the UK.
What made you want to continue sort of being in dangerous environments?
I didn't want to be in dangerous environments. It was just the job that I was doing, and I could
Yeah.
do it better than the person that they had already. So yeah, I did that, as an undercover journalist, and then as an investigative journalist for Panorama, running around the world doing ridiculous things. Netflix came knocking on the door,
Yeah.
asking me if I would dare to go back into prisons to document.
And how was that going back into prisons?
In some places it was challenging because it was similar to the British prison systems, but in other places it
All
was
around the world, right?
Yeah, and it was
Yeah.
horrifying. Horrifying to the point where human beings shouldn't be treated that way. Don't get me wrong. I'm very much a believer that if you've done a crime, you go to prison. If you've killed someone, you should spend the rest of your life in prison, literally,
Yeah.
if only to appease the family of the victim or the person who you've killed or whatever. But every case and circumstance is different, right, Tom? You and I
Yeah.
walk out of here
Yeah.
today and we're going down the road and some guy comes up to me and kicks me in the shin, and you push him and he falls and he hits his head and he dies. Tom, you've never done anything to harm anybody in your life before. All of a sudden, you're standing up in court being convicted of the manslaughter of the guy that you pushed, and you're going to prison for 10 years. Doesn't make you an animal and a bad guy, right? So I meet these people all over the world, but some of them are being held in some of the most horrendous conditions. And that's what we were documenting in the Netflix
Yeah.
show, the balance between what
Yeah.
resources can and can't provide.
It was, and I was checking out bits of it last night, and I saw, you're meeting people who have committed these really atrocious crimes.
Mm.
How is that for you when you are talking to those people who are guilty?
I have my standards. I won't shake the hand of a or a paedophile if I know they're a or a paedophile. And that's a legacy of my time in prison because they were ostracized, and I don't approve of. It's a strange one because I'll shake the hand of a murderer, but if I can avoid it, won't shake the hands of a sex offender for the simple reason they are deviant to the point that they know what they're doing.
Yeah. And how do you navigate communicating with these people that you can't?
Translator?
but like emotionally, that must be, so
I think
difficult
there's a connection because I was them.
Yeah.
Simple as that. I was them sitting in that confined space. I know what it smells like, what it feels like. I know how wet it is. I know how dry it is. I know what a pornographic magazine can do for a person in that environment, or an extra Snicker bar, Mars bar, or bag of Maltesers, or a biscuit, or a
Yeah.
roll up. I know how desperate someone can get when they can't get those things.
Yeah.
You don't have money in prison. You don't have commodities. It's a whole black market everywhere in the world. So
Yeah.
I know what it's like to be deprived of the things that you can access every minute of your life, as can your audience.
Yeah. And is there a deep sense now in your life of gratitude for those things? Or has it
It's been fulfilled.
gotten normal? Yeah. What do you mean by that?
It's been fulfilled. I want for nothing but for my kids to be better than I am. I love in a way that I never ever thought I could love. I love my kids beyond anything. I have a son who's your age.
Yeah.
And it's unconditional.
Yeah.
Something I never thought
Does that
I'd
change you a
find.
lot having kids?
It was the most pivotal moment in my life. Going to prison, having
Really?
watched my son be born 21 years ago, something I thought would never happen, changed me again. And then 5 years later, my daughter pops up, and it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And when you're going into those prisons for the
Mm.
Netflix show, how can you tell if it's the place is safe or not?
I can't. I can't. So I take precautions in how I approach people, I think one of the most challenging things is the teams that I go in with, because they often have never been into a prison before. They don't know how to navigate that space, and they become too relaxed, or they start to think, oh, aren't they nice? And they don't know that nice guy is trying to manipulate them into a corner where they can, if it's a female, potentially her. I would never say that as cold as that, but um,
I mean, that is unbelievably heavy to deal with on the daily.
we've been attacked off camera a couple of times in some of the establishments that we've been in, and we're talking about establishments where men chop the heads off of other men and use them as footballs in Brazil, in South America.
I can't imagine that, like what you've just said. How do you experience these places and then you leave them? How does this change you? How is that?
I suppose you're on this journey, right? Because you're
Yeah.
interviewing me, right?
Yes,
And I've
yeah.
done that for the last 25 years, right? So it's about being professional. It's about sitting in the space with a man who has just told me that he's killed 36 women. He's a serial killer. And I'm interviewing him. This is in Ukraine. I'm interviewing one of the most prolific serial killers that ever existed, right? Convicted of killing, he's a necrophiliac as well, 36 women, suspected of killing more than 100. And I'm looking at his hands and I'm thinking, those hands, what they've done, I'm not going to touch those hands but I'm professional enough to just ask him the questions that will educate the audience that are watching this Netflix show about mankind.
And what do you hope that the audience takes from that interview?
I don't. If I did, I wouldn't be able to do my job. I just ask the questions and let them take from it what they want. Surprisingly, what I have found is that people are far more empathetic and sympathetic about the people that are in prison than I ever imagined they would be.
And what have you learned from doing those interviews?
I've learned that people are more sympathetic and
Yeah.
empathetic about people that are in prison. I've learned that, all over the globe, and our country is one of the most challenging, in accepting that people do deserve a second chance, even
Yeah.
those that have done bad things. That if you give them a second chance, maybe they will embrace it and do the right thing on that second chance. That people believe in that around the globe. It really surprises me. I don't think in the 6 years that I've been doing Inside the World's Toughest Prisons, going into some of the most horrific places and speaking to children killers, serial killers, robbers, murderers, all types of guys, I don't think I've ever had messages on social media or whatever from people saying, yeah, lock them up and throw away the key, like you do when you make one program here on the BBC, and people
Yeah.
do. And don't get me wrong, Tom. People are entitled to their opinions and their views, and rightly so. And I'm standing beside them, but I'm also standing beside the others that say the opposite.
Yeah. And what of all the prisons you've seen have been the best and the worst prisons that have, in terms of the condition that the inmates have been kept in?
That's a good question, but it's for me every one of them. When you're
Yeah.
confined in a space where there's no handle on the inside of a door, psychologically, that will break even the strongest.
Yeah.
And if it's not because there's no handle on the inside of a door, it might be because they're taken away from their wife and children, or their husband and children. So prison has a different impact on different people for different reasons. And it doesn't matter whether you've got a television in your cell, a sink and a toilet, or you've got access to, like some people have said, oh my God, those prisons in Norway, they're like better than my student digs. No, they're not. You can go out and
Yeah.
have a
you're
night
free.
out and have a drink and whatever. So your room might be horrible, but every prison is as bad as another prison for those reasons. The
Yeah.
psychological scars of being confined in a space for a very long time are unrepairable.
Yeah. Well, look, unfortunately, Raphael, I haven't made it through the 100 questions. I've got 11 left, but I've ran out of time.
Ah,
So I'm going to go for the last question now, the final question.
okay.
But first of all, thank you so much. Dramatic lights came on.
Oh, right.
Yeah, you like that? Yeah.
Stop.
But thank you so much for this discussion and for being so open with me and for talking about this experience. It's so completely foreign to my world, but to learn about it and to understand it, I think is really important and really. I'll be thinking about this for the conversation for a very long time.
Good.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
Final question.
Are you allowed to do that? Cheat? That's cheating.
No. Well, now, it's quite an interesting question. I'm interested to know what you think about it. If you had the option to go back in time and not go to prison, would you do that, or do you think it's made you who you are today?
It's made me who I am today. That's not to say that I would ever go back to that experience,
Yeah.
and I would not choose that option But the fact that I did go through that experience has made me the man that I am today, the
Yeah.
dad, the parent, the journalist, and all the other things that it's given me. So
Yeah.
there's no question my experience has shaped the person that I am. But if you said to me, let's go back in time and then you can go down that path, which is freedom and not prison, or down that path, which you know is going to end up sitting here talking to Tom, who wasn't even born when I was put in prison, I'd go down the path that I could end up becoming a crackhead or a criminal or the prime minister, because I would never have known who or what I would have become when I was 20.
Yeah.
So it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Well, Raphael, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. I've really appreciated you being here and being so open. This has been 100 questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well done. Thank
Cheers.
you. 100 Questions is now on Patreon. If you want the full 100 questions, completely ad-free, uninterrupted, and all of its chaotic glory, it's the place to be. But wait, come on. It's not just the 100 questions. No. There's so much more. Along with the extended cuts, you get exclusive group chat access to suggest guests and questions for us and chat with other fans of the show. You also get an exclusive monthly audience Q&A with me, bonus questions from each guest, and the post-show debrief with myself and one of the 100 Questions team. As well as that behind-the-scenes content from how the episodes actually came together. To celebrate the launch of 100 Questions, we have an exclusive Founders tier available for the first 100 people. Your support directly helps the team and helps us keep making the show bigger, better, and continue to get some really insane guests. So head over to our Patreon to support the show. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you, and have a great night.